Welcome to the Ultimate Coach Podcast, Conversations from Being, inspired by the book, The Ultimate Coach, written by Amy Hardison and Alan Thompson. Join us each week with the intention of expanding your state of being, and your experience will be remarkable. Remember, this is a podcast about being. It is a podcast about you. To explore more deeply, visit theultimatecoachbook.com. Now, enjoy today's conversation from being.
Welcome to the Ultimate Coach Podcast, James. I'm so excited to speak with you today. And, I'm just curious, before we really get into how were you introduced to the Ultimate Coach book, what made you interested in wanting to be a guest on the podcast?
Ooh, I love that question. And thank you for such a warm welcome. I'd say for me, it's really an element of, having become familiar with Steve's work and just so many amazing people that I see sharing the work. What really interested me is I feel like even though, from what I see, Steve has his context of being, I feel like we all go through our own journey of what being means to us individually. That I thought, one, it's totally fun to talk about because you hear things that you never expected. And two, I feel like that is to me, I've always been a person that learns from hearing others and their journey and their stories. And it's like these puzzle pieces that come together. And so I figured I'm probably going to have some puzzle pieces that come together for me, even being here. And two, I want to help others. So I guess I did 1, 2, and then 1, 2 again. So maybe that's 4.
It sounds like it. Yeah, if we're doing our math correctly. So that's great. Thank you for answering that question, because I also understand from you that being in conversation about what being is something that lights you up and is probably constantly in your orbit. And just looking at your website, it appears it is part of what you help your clients with as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the way that you share that of it's something that's kind of constantly in orbit. You immediately had me go to a flashback. There was a coach that I worked with years ago. He was one of my first really larger investments. And I forget what it's called. Is it like an acrostic or anyway, he took my last name and he just sent me a picture. And, my last name is spelled, it's Wightman. And I just saw my name and I didn't get it until I didn't know it was my last name until someone pointed it out to me. But it said, wherever I go, higher thoughts manifest as normal. And I didn't realize that it was spelled with my last name. And so when he said it's just kind of always in my orbit, I just had a flashback to there.
Oh, and that's so on point. Yeah.
Yep.
I believe those are called acronyms.
Yeah, I think, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So now I'm curious, when did you come across the work of Steve Hardison and what led you to read the Ultimate Coach book?
Yep. So it's been a progressive journey. So originally, where the journey began, I would say, even before knowing who Steve Hardison was, when I was getting into really just coaching and being of service to people, I had signed up for all different types of programs, and some of them were marketing and sales and all these different things. And they would work for like a short period of time. And it felt, I don't know, something felt very confusing. And then I discovered, or I didn't really discover, someone basically put in front of me Steve Chandler and Rich Litvin with The Prosperous Coach. And Steve Chandler was someone that just really resonated with me in the way that he wrote. It just felt really direct. Mm-hmm. And so I went through a journey of going through, his material, and he'd always message Steve Hardison. And there was a period of time where, I was going through my own challenges and ups and downs in business, and really connecting to, I guess who I am and who I'm being in these different moments. And I saw that Steve's book was coming out. And so it's sort of like these nuggets or these sprinkles had been placed, throughout the years. And it's like, oh, there's this amazing book coming out. And, just the fact to read it, as something to see myself in, and to read it as something for me was really special. And so that's really what launched me into reading the book and really getting a deeper understanding of that journey into, I guess, myself, my own being.
Yeah. Was there any particular part of the book that really resonated with you? I have to laugh when I ask that question, because it depends on what day it is, what mood you're in, because even for me, I bounce around a lot, but okay.
Yeah, I hear you on that. So I don't necessarily know if at the time, I don't know if resonated was the word, but it was actually probably more frustrated and angry and because I think, what it really illuminated, and I'll get to the specific moment in the book, but what I discovered was when I would read books or personal growth, any of these things, essentially what was happening for me, the way that I was being was honestly, I maybe it was like a chip on the shoulder, or I was just pretty much always comparing myself. And so the personal growth was more like, I don't know, like a personal tantrum. Like I'd see someone could say like, hey, here's this thing you can do. And what would occur for me is, oh, I'm not doing that. There must be something wrong with me, or I'm falling short. And so there was a particular moment, right, in the book where, it's talking about where Steve was, I believe he was in another country. He was on mission, and he was able to just go up and talk to people and have a conversation. And everything that came up for me in there was, I'm shy. I have fear. I'm scared. This doesn't feel like something that I could do. And almost like there was something special about Steve, but there wasn't something special about me. He had something that I didn't. And so it definitely didn't necessarily resonate at the time. But I felt, I just felt frustrated and angry.
That's so great. I love that answer. I was waiting to have a guest like you. Everybody's like, oh yeah, it was great. My life changed immediately. It's like, that wasn't really my complete experience, which is why I had a walk with Steve, but I digress. Anyway, so I love that you answered it that way. Okay. Yes. Let's get into this now.
And, it really arose something within me, actually, just like the frustration and anger. And honestly, I probably started to have tears because of, part of the work that, over the years that I've incorporated, which this idea of being, part of it has been like, who am I even being with myself? And just the fact that I was having anger and all that, it was, the question that I really had to have for myself is, one, what's coming up for me here? And two, who is it that I could be with myself as I'm just recognizing that I'm going through this? And so I had to put like a hand on my heart and just be like, you're okay. Like you're safe. And really just recognizing there was some old part or some old piece of me that in that context, in that idea of just going up and talking to someone and feeling easeful in conversations, it was almost, I come from a background of like hypnosis and NLP. And so there's a thing called parts work. And so this idea that, part of myself, that might have been like the 12-year-old part of myself that I was being in relationship to my work or my business or just being with people, that honestly was probably that scared self that I really was an opportunity to step into the mature self, like that higher level version of myself, to see that, what a wonderful opportunity. And that's my relationship with being now, right? Like, what a wonderful opportunity that someone can present a higher level idea or way of being that I could say, oh, that's actually possible. Like, that's something I could even do. Hadn't even thought of that. And so it was like a complete shift of I'm angry, I'm scared, I'm fearful at even the idea of going out there and talking to someone, to actually, what if just who I am is an amazing gift for others to experience, and I get to be with them.
Yeah.
And so that, I feel like I just kind of like gave a whole arching overview. But yeah, that was my experience of that particular moment in that book.
So when he was on mission in London,
yeah,
and he was able to easily connect with people, you had this whole inner shift with yourself, understanding like these different parts of you that, and then I guess you took a moment to close the book and touch your heart and reconnect.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And I'm not going to say it was like hey, I was just reading it and, this moment occurred and everything was different. Honestly, that part really probably lasted, honestly, a week to two, because I know that it really had stuck with me. So even when I was trying to continue reading forward, part of my mind just kept going back to that point or that moment. So it felt like as I continued to progress through the book, like these different pieces began to come together and start to add context or nuances to different things that I didn't have before. So I feel like it was a bit of a process for me, even just realizing what was occurring for me.
Yeah. So by the time you got to the end of the book, like how many iterations of you had you worked through?
Oh, wow. Part of me is like infinite. It just kind of keeps going. Honestly, I feel like there's an element, and I like the way they broke it into these different parts.
Yeah.
Because they're, in the beginning, there's these earlier moments or these earlier stages. And it almost felt like, for me, it's like these iterations are like moments from the past that I'm kind of, for lack of a better word, like healing, or having different context around. And so I think when we think of like these iterations, we always think like now forward. And I'm like, oh no, like I'm healing versions of myself from even the past, and like going through and just kind of being at peace with certain parts of myself. And so, I'm 34 years old, so I'll probably say, 34 parts of me. Maybe I'll go with that. Probably double, could be triple.
Wow. Yeah, that's something to think about. Yeah, definitely. With each year we have different parts because we have different experiences. I was about to say we progress, not necessarily progress, right? Because you can be stagnant and have more experiences in the new year. So,
yeah. And immediately what you have me thinking of, because I think originally, and I think this is true, but one of the things that really stood out to me, I think of when Steve Hardison was working with Steve Chandler, and Steve Chandler, I think he had to go to, I'm trying to remember it exactly, but basically there was a role that Steve H wanted Steve Chandler to do. And Steve Chandler was like, oh no, like that's not me. I can't do that. And Steve Hardison was like, well, if you can't do it, be someone that can,
Yes.
And yeah.
Yeah.
And so I really like that idea of, even if we're able to emulate a way of being or step into a way of being, I think it's really, really powerful. And I've done that in moments in my life, and I've done that with clients. And I found that sometimes, not always, but there's these elements where there can be a part where it's still kind of, the old version might kind of be sticking. Mm-hmm. And that's where this element of, and that phrase that I wrote down of like, who am I being with myself? Because the way that I would be with myself, or I would see clients would be that this old version would kind of pop up a little bit here and there. And the way to handle it was kind of just to like push it down and try and do something different. And it would work to get things done. But at least speaking from my own experience, there'd be an element where maybe there was just like a piece of my mind where it's like something felt incomplete. And so that's where I'd bring the hand to my heart and I'd say, I love you. And like you can let go now. And just doing that, it felt like a release to be open to really just embodying that full being of whoever we're stepping into, and sending love back to that old version that was trying to be something different, thought that they needed to be something, instead of just like consciously choosing.
I'm evolving during this conversation. I'm so happy I'm talking to you today.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. I mean, this is lovely. And I love that there's like so many different contexts, it's, I feel like I'm evolving at the same time. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And I, for those who are listening and sharing with other people, this conversation from being, just like with the book, hear yourself here, like I'm in this conversation with you, but I'm hearing myself in your story, so the being continues, right?
Yeah.
I'm wondering, you keep talking about putting your hand on your heart and saying, I love you, you're safe, everything's okay. Is this something that just developed over time, or is it a practice from, your NLP, or where is that from?
Yeah. So the way that it developed, my partner, Ellie, she very much came from a background of yoga and meditation and a lot of different embodied experiences. And for me, I've always kind of been the operations, like logistics, very much in the head in some context. And so part of my growth in entrepreneurship was really doing my best to understand how to have practical skills to manage what's coming up. Because I think sometimes when we hear entrepreneurship or we hear these ideas that we want to step into, a lot of times we can think like, oh, we just do this thing and then everything else will be good in life. And I really like to think of it in the context of relationships. With our significant other, this idea that we're going to do work and then everything's just going to be like easy breezy for the rest of the relationship doesn't work that way. And at the same time, it's okay if there's disagreements. And so if there can be room for almost these uncomfortable feelings, it's not that they're never going to happen to us again, or they're not going to happen in relationship again. But what does change is our relationship with them. And so when we're stepping into new ways of being, when we are taking action in whatever our business may be or whatever our life may be, not everyone has a business. And so instead of kind of like always trying to workshop stuff in our head, because I've always found that in at least in my life and from my experience, I can be very strong to work things out in the brain. And then it reaches a certain point where it turns into overwhelm. And so that becomes an indicator to me that I've sort of like utilized the tangible data and action that I have. And when it starts to become overwhelming, it means that I've reached out to like too many data points, like too many fictional stories and possibilities that it becomes overwhelming. And so it's an indicator that action is important. And so in order to actually move into action, to move into another level, I have to shift the relationship with whatever the feelings are that are coming up, because when we take new actions, when we try something different, there's going to be all this energy. There's going to be all these feelings. And so part of changing the relationship with that, and I teach this to my clients, I teach it to, whoever I'm working with, because they could come in angry or I may be angry. And so instead of trying to like solve the anger, I like to picture it almost like a little kid, right? Like if a little kid came up to you, you wouldn't be like, hey, just figure this out. You'd be like, hey, you know what? You're okay. You're going to be safe. Everything's going to be fine. And so as we, have our hand on our heart, or we're speaking to that part of us that is feeling anger, that is feeling fear, frustration, we're essentially bringing love to that part of us, and really getting to the heart of the matter, which is like feeling just safe and like that we're okay. And anytime I've done that with people, they feel, and including myself, they feel a release and a loosening up, because what we can sometimes think is that if we say to just fix something or that it should be different, that it will get better. And a lot of times that actually cements the response and the reaction that we don't want. And so when we can bring that love to whatever's happening and it releases that, we become open to new possibilities. We're able to open our vision of what we even see as possible. And it helps us step into another level, because it helps us actually feel like we're on our own team, on our own side, instead of feeling like there's a part of us working against ourselves. So that's really how that developed, because I was going through, a few years ago, a really challenging time in business. And Ellie kind of just said, hey, put your hand on your heart. And I did that. And that's where it was like a gateway. And I just kind of had these phrases coming to me that's, I love you. You can let go now. And so there's all different ways to manage that. So to me, that's like the practical skill of who we're being, right? Our mature self with that younger version that might be freaking out.
I love the way you explained all that, because I know for people who are more logical thinkers, they needed to hear all that. And I really appreciate you, really going through the depth of your experience in shifting and taking care of yourself in that way, and then integrating that into your work. See, for me, I would have just said, it's about allowing the body's wisdom to take care of me, because ultimately that's what you're saying. You're hugging yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And then when you touch yourself, this is the thing, this is the natural result. These declarations come up, right? Whatever it is that your mind needs to hear from your body, right? That's what happens when you touch your heart. Yeah. So, that is an exceptional way of being. And that is truly, you make it accessible, to everyone in the way that you explain it.
Thank you. I appreciate that reflection. Cause I'm like, wait, did I just did I go over too many levels there, instead of answering it like straight and direct. So I appreciate the reflection back.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. That was perfect, because I was like, yeah. And then you went over here and then you went over there. And I was like, you know what? Somebody needs to hear it in this way. Probably many people need to hear it in that way, because what my mind immediately goes to is like here, in the West, we're very, we think that our brain is what runs the show.
Right.
Yeah. But I feel like definitely through the past couple of years with COVID and everything, we've learned that there's a different way of being, and so by the time that this particular episode airs, it'll be after the Ultimate Experience India edition. And so we'll be having that conversation of being in the East, you see, and where East meets West with being, because basically with Ellie being a yogi, right? She's already in the Eastern philosophy,
Yep.
right? And me, I'm a tantrika, which is also Eastern philosophy, right? But then we live here in the West. So I love that we're having this conversation. We're recording it before that particular event. And this is a bridge in the same way. I think it'll be perfect timing when it airs, actually, is what I'm thinking. So, when I say that, what do you think?
One, immediately my thought was, I love that. Because I think there's, especially with the East and West and this idea, I think there's so many modalities and like so many skill sets. And I think of when I went to an acupuncturist before, he said Western medicine is great if you break an arm and, they need to heal that. And Eastern medicine is great, to deal with the energy and a lot of those things that are happening. So I think there's always a balance. And I went to a Zen center. There's a Zen center that I visited for a year, and they talk about the middle way. And I always thought it was this almost like a collaboration or maybe a little bit of a compromise, but mainly a collaboration, right? Like on one side, you have one way of doing things. On the second side, you have another way of doing things. And then, maybe you meet in the middle. And my perception of that actually began to change. That's what I thought when I had first started visiting the Zen Center. And then at the end of that, my perception changed of the middle way being two things being able to coexist and something new that we didn't even know was possible to emerge. And so that East and West and that combination and something, new coming of that, that being, I think is actually really powerful. And I'm excited to see, what emerges or what comes from that.
I know. Yeah, it's already happening. It's happening now.
Yeah.
And I love it. I think it's, more so than East and West. I think it's kind of like human beings welcoming their ancient wisdom, right? Whereas before we used to reject it,
right,
and discredit it. And now we're like, no, those humans, they knew what they were doing, and we know what we're doing too. And so it's more of an era of connecting dots of the best way of being a human being and stop being a human doing, which is what I feel like the industrial age got us to, is being human doings,
Absolutely. And I love that take, right? And because it makes me think of kind of, what I was sharing before when you were talking about the iterations, right? The past self, with, the present self. And so like you were sharing, there's things that in the past, there was a lot of wisdom there and a lot of usefulness. And so it's, taking that, what works, and combining it with what works today and seeing, how that meets, which I think is definitely really special.
Yeah. And I think that Western and Eastern medicine work well together to heal bones too.
Yeah. I just, I use that as I guess an example that was shared with me, but yeah, I agree. I definitely understand what you mean.
Because you need both.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I'm wondering, on your website, what did it say? It said something about it's your frequency and your way of being that creates the outcomes. What does that mean?
I think so. The way that I would describe this is, and this can work even if people aren't in business. Sometimes we think if we just take the action steps that we'll get the result. And I think that probably works in schooling. But I think in terms of life and business, there's a difference between, let's say you're having a conversation with someone and maybe maybe someone's wanting to create clients. And so they might just think, hey, if I just have conversations, I'm going to talk with someone and then, I can, maybe I can have them potentially become a client. When someone's coming from that place, they're kind of just hoping for a result. And so when I talk about frequency and who you're being, one is when I work with people, I want to understand what is their way of actually doing things. What do they enjoy? Because there's so much around personal development and personal growth and business now that there's a million ways to do things. So one, does it even align with them? And so I like to help them figure out what's their way of doing things, what actually suits their personality and just their natural frequency of how they like to operate. And then number two is how can they bring that into the actions that they'd like? And so the reason why I brought up the conversations is sometimes in business, especially, I notice it probably more with men than I do with women, but a lot of times people can have a temperament where they just want to take the action and hope it produces the result. And then there's the actual being and the frequency of it, of enjoying the way you do your business, enjoying the way that you have conversations with people, actually being of service instead of just trying to get a sale. And so when I say frequency and being, it's really that element of art, I guess, to, like when you said saying things simply, pretty much enjoying what they're doing. And because I just meet a lot of people who try to do things to get the result instead of actually finding the joy and bringing the joy to what they're doing. And it can make a big difference in their business and life. Yeah.
What I'm hearing there is like service meets an outcome, right? So it's like service. Let me back up with that. So like in the Ultimate Coach book, when he's talking about serving people, it's just like what you said. It's that real, true relationship building, right? Connecting with another human from that space. And the automatic outcome is when it's meant to be, right? It may not happen in that moment, but when it's appropriate, right? The person will be like, you know what? I know that I can trust James. And, I know that he cares about my well-being. And so if I'm going to invest in coaching, I'm going to invest with James because he will actually serve me, serve my purposes. Right. And a lot of people miss that, right? They're just like, well, going back to in the beginning when you were talking about using all the marketing strategies, well, I just got to hit my numbers, right? And, have this many touches with these types of people, you got it all down to a science. And you're just like, nope. The way to be the most successful is to go back to the beginning, right? In the relationship building and just letting people know that you're really there for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the way that you captured that, and the way that they get to do that is what resonates, for them. So for me, I tend to be a big gift giver. And so I always like to, send people different trinkets I say trinkets, but sometimes it could be a book. Sometimes it could be something that is really meaningful to them. Sometimes it could just be a card with words that I know that they need to hear. Some people aren't, primarily gift givers. Some people might be the words of affirmation. And so if they really enjoy writing, great things for people, they could write. Some people are very much, acts of service. They may be contributing in so many different ways. And so they really get to tune into of how they enjoy being of service, how they enjoy giving. A designer might help someone with a website or different things like that. And it coming from a place of really feeling like they want to provide it to the other person, not that they're trying to get their business.
Yeah. And if you're already working with someone, I'm hearing you're also appreciating them through gifts.
Yeah. That's something that I like to do. And so, there's all different things people can do with just their way of being of service and giving. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I feel like we've touched on like so many ways of being and like depths of it and top layers of it. I'm wondering, is there anything else you'd like to put in the space?
I'm just going to tune in for a moment. I think what I would like people to know is that whatever they want is accessible to them the more they tune into themselves and how they operate to make their highest contribution to the world. And that a contribution can be something really simple. Because in the past, for me, I always thought I needed to contribute in such like a huge way to really make a difference. And that's still doable. However, just the people in your life and in your world, even just the really simple things that might seem easy for you can make a huge difference in somebody else's life. And it doesn't have to, take up all the time in the world. You know, I'm a quality of time person. And in the past, I used to confuse that with quantity of time. And I had to realize quality of time really has to do with the meaning that we're putting into something. And so who's ever listening, for the people in your life, there's things that you can do that would make a big difference. And they might be really simple to you. They might even feel easy for you. And that is probably a representation that it is within your natural frequency and just your being. And it'll probably feel really good to make a difference for people in those ways.
I love that you said that. I love that you took a moment to tune in as well. It's really been an absolute joy speaking with you today, James. So I'm Cordelia Gaffar. I just want to mention that because someone said before that, oh, which one are you? And for those of you listening to this episode, please share this with another heart, share this with another soul. And thank you for listening to the Ultimate Coach podcast.
Thank you for listening. If you know someone who would benefit from today's conversation, please share this podcast with them. Also, we invite you to visit theultimatecoachbook.com so you can continue your personal exploration of being. There you will find links to join our wonderful community, get your own copy of the Ultimate Coach book, and more. Simply go now to www.theultimatecoachbook.com. That's www.theultimatecoachbook.com. The link is also available in the show notes. We appreciate your support. Be blessed. Be you.